What's going on, good people? Thank you for tuning in to the Angels Online, voice of the unheard, brought to you by me, Angel. You can check it out each and every Wednesday. Like, subscribe, follow, whatever social media platform you utilize. If you would like to donate, you can go to anchor.fm/the Angels Online. If you would like to become a monthly sponsor, you can go to patreon.com/the Angels Online and become a monthly sponsor. But remember, whatever you choose to do, understand and know that you are appreciated. Now, let's get it. Good people, you got to get a people what they want. Woo! Good people, you got to get a people what they want. Woo! Good people.
Holy man.
John, we got John in the building today, y'all. This episode is John Avery. What's up, John?
What's up with it? How you doing?
I'm living a dream.
As usual.
I'm living a dream. You know how to talk to a mic.
Not really.
Don't scare the mic. Don't be scared of it. It ain't gonna bounce
I'm
back.
good. I mean, you ain't got to get all
I'm
up
messing
on
with
it.
you. I'm
Right,
messing
okay.
with you.
Yeah, I'm good, man.
All right. So how you doing today?
Awesome. No complaints.
Okay. So, season 1, Diamond in the Rough. Overcoming circumstances, adversities. Tell me, John, who are you? Where you from?
John from St. Louis, Missouri, born in the 60s. Pretty much spent all of my life here except for when I left to go to the military. And that would have been, college and military. So that would have been a period of 84, and I came back to St. Louis in 90, or should I say 80, late 89, going into the 90s.
Okay. What part of St. Louis you from?
All over, man.
All over. What that mean?
What that means is I probably did about 9 grade schools.
That's K
Coming
through
from
5.
Yeah. No. That's pretty much.
You mean
back then it would have been considered from kindergarten to the 8th grade.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Okay,
Remember,
okay.
When having like a stability as far as residency, you know what I'm saying? We moved a lot.
Okay.
And for the record, at some point you may ask, like I didn't graduate school until I was like 19.
High school?
Yeah, but most of that was because my records kept getting lost.
Because you went to so many schools.
Oh yeah,
kept
no
being
doubt, no
moving
doubt.
around.
Yeah.
Okay. So tell me about your childhood.
Where you want me to start? If you want to go back to birth, man, I was pretty much born into homelessness, you know?
Born
Seriously.
into homelessness?
Yeah. Born, but pretty much at a young age. My mother actually, I won't say she gave me away, you know what I'm saying? But coming out of, as a baby, you don't remember anything.
Right.
But to the point that I could remember, all I recall is living with an older couple.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
my first experience as far as a parent, whoever that person once you start to understand what visualization is, that was my parent. And it just happened to be an old couple. So I didn't know what was going on until I was about 2, when my mother actually showed up and came and got me.
At 2 years old?
Yeah.
That time you could see terrible twos. Was you bad? Yeah. So, when your mom came and got you, she raised you?
Nah, man, it was all temporary stays, you know what I'm saying? Throughout my childhood, and that's why I often just tell people I was homeless, for the simple fact that the habit that we had, like I had a younger sister and older brother.
Uh-huh.
Now, when I say that recall that older couple, my brother and sister wasn't in the picture.
Okay.
So it's almost like whenever she brought us together, you know what I'm saying? And I think her history was pretty much drugs, alcohol, you know what I'm saying? And her mother died young. So my guess is she really didn't know how to raise kids.
Okay.
So for her, the drugs was a priority.
The what?
Drugs.
Okay.
And so my guess is when she finally brought us together, like when I say temporary stays, it would be almost like, let's say she would come and get us. And this happened throughout my childhood. I didn't really find stability until like maybe the 4th grade. And if you want to go back into, prior to the 4th grade, it would be like we'd all get together and all we know is my mother's taking us to either male or female house. and all we know is this is where we stand. But we would wake up and then my mother would be gone.
Oh.
You see what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
So when you're a kid, you're not really gauging time. So I would say it could be, you may be there for a week. And then the next thing you know, your mother's no longer around. But the people you're living with, what would happen is, all you know is they're feeding you until there comes a point in time when now you realize there's a discussion. What are we going to do with these kids? You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And then, I don't know what her contact means were, but at some point in time, it would just look like, hey, I'm sending a cab to come and get you guys. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Whichever came first. So what would happen is, oftentimes, the way, to my knowledge, the way I recall it, let's say, for instance, we're at somebody's house. Back in those days, sometimes you just get put out, even if you was a young age.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? So what would happen is, being kids, you don't know what to do next. So all we would know is, to us, it would be like a blur. Because let's say we walk in, I'll give you a good example. Walking through alleys, and then you see some wet clothing in a pile or something. We just know we hadn't taken a shower or hadn't had on new clothes in a long time. So we would actually just go to that pile, man, and we would just dig through it.
Wow.
And find something that we could fit. So let's say our next encounter with an adult, whoever we're going to live with by whatever means. You know what I'm saying? If somebody either recognizes us being homeless, somebody sought us out, somebody found us, whatever the case may be. At that moment in time, they had no way of knowing that we found these clothes.
Mm-hmm.
To them, it just looked like kids wandering. And I can even tell you how we had a good sense of direction.
Wow.
That is not an exaggeration. As a matter of fact, when I was mentioning to you just then about the 4th grade, here's how it changed for me. My brother and sister did foster home. But at one of the locations where we were abandoned, I remember the police came because the guy was saying we couldn't live in his house anymore. So what would happen is he had them old shacks in the back of the house. You probably wouldn't remember. So what would happen is at nighttime, we would go sleep in those shacks. So when we emerge in the morning, it would be like we go back to the block. If you think about those old cartoons where you see a bunch of kids playing in the streets, we would just emerge and be in that situation. So if you think about it, nobody was really can't really fault nobody because they really didn't know what was going on because we didn't know to tell nobody or not.
Right.
So what would happen is we just blend in. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So what would happen is if you had a friend in that bunch or whatever, you go to a friend's house and that was probably how we were eating.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? But as the night fell, that's when it goes back to you go to a shack or something. Well, finally it was discovered, though, in one of those situations. And this is how my separation started versus my brother and sister. The police came to pick us up. To me, this is, all I know is I don't want to deal with the police. I recall my brother and sister going to sit in the car, right? Here's me. Always been smart. I'm looking, and in the city back then, and some people may still know about this right now, old houses tended to have, you open the front door, and you can see straight through the back door because of the way the halls were. You can't see straight through a house anymore.
Okay.
But back then you could. So ironically, when I looked, all I knew was I didn't want to get in this car, but I saw that back door open, so I told the police, I got to use the bathroom. So I went into this house, this apartment. I bypassed the bathroom, and I was over the fence. Okay. And believe it or not, I ran. And if anybody know where Blewett School is, right there at, it was on 20th Street. If you recall Blewett School, right there at Cass and 20th Street. It was in that block behind there on 20th Street. So what happened was when I ran through there, I was just running. But at some point, you get tired. So I recall ducking down in some tall leaves. And my brother to this day say when the police car was looking for me, he said he saw me up against a house in a vacant lot hiding in the
bush.
Not bushes, it was, you would call it weeds. Mm-hmm. Just an unkept lot.
Okay.
So he say he saw me. So from that point on, and I kid you not, this is where it all kind of takes a wild turn. They went into a foster home. But when I went back, after a while, I thought about it. Man, what am I going to do? I'm too young. I don't know where to go next. And how long can I stay out here on these streets? So actually, I went back to where the police had picked them up at. All of a sudden, for whatever reason, I hear grown folks saying, you're a bad dude. Kid you not. So the next thing I know, I'm living with people in that block. I'm not even, I'm not conscious of it. As a kid, you don't plan this out. You just take it as it comes. So what ended up happening was, all of a sudden, I looked up one day and my grandfather was there. You know what I'm saying? I don't know who called him. I don't even know how anybody knew who we were. I don't even know if they knew anything about it. But somehow he showed up and he got me. And so what ended up happening was, went to stay with him, and he went and got my brother and sister out of the foster home. As I speak to you right now, I can't even tell you how long I was in that situation prior to him coming. All I do know that I was sleeping at somebody's apartment or whatever the case may be, because they had kids. So then the journey from there, he go get them. But then here's the dilemma there. Probably around that age, I was probably about 5 or 6. Not sure, but I was probably about 5 or 6. He get them out of the foster home, and what happens from there is he's older. So he get us, keep us, I don't even know if we even stayed there for a year. But there came a point in time when we were just too much for him and his wife. And they were living in a 2-bedroom, first floor. It's 2 stories, but they was living on the first floor. They made it work as best they could. Matter of fact, that was my first Christmas. Yeah, that was my first Christmas.
At the age of 6.
Yeah, probably about 6 or 7. That was my first Christmas. And the school that we went to was Jackson. For anybody who may know of the school, that's right there at Union and Arlington.
Okay.
Not Union and Arlington, but Page and Arlington. Union would be 1 block over. They ran in the same direction. And we stayed there. And then one day we looked up. He was like, I got to give you all up. And here comes the separation again. So my brother and sister, they went back to a foster home. I went and stayed with my father's mother.
Okay.
And her daughter. My father, he was aware, but I found out later that during that homelessness period, I had a chance to stay with him. You know, you and I kind of touched bases on that, so I'm not sure how much you want to get into the details on that. But he didn't, and the crazy reason why he didn't want me to stay with him, he was married. Now this is gonna sound crazy.
Go ahead.
But what ended up happening was, man, this is deep right here, and it was verified later. This is not an exaggeration. So I recall, and we could go back if you have questions, but I'm gonna get to, at around the age of right before I ended up living with my grandmother from the 4th to the 8th grade. That was during a period that my brother and sister was in a foster home. During that time is when my grandmother had told me that actually I had a chance to go live with him and his wife. Here was the dilemma that I've discovered later, and she told me this at the time. Should I say I couldn't question it until later? What ended up happening was they had a big house, man. It was a nice big house, white collars and everything. He was an X-ray tech. She was a school teacher, and they lived in what was called Bill Nor. And for anyone who may be familiar with it, you ever road up St. Charles Rock Road and you come up to this cemetery on one side and the golf course in that area where the golf course is.
Okay.
So what ended up happening, they were always living there. And I remember my grandmother told me the only reason I couldn't go stay with him during that homelessness period as a kid was because his wife, and they were all in a church, his wife told her the reason why she didn't want me to come and live with them was because she already had 2 kids and she's out of Texas. So her and my father, after they got married, they had a daughter, my biological sister. But the other 2 weren't mine. But because they were in a church, this was her concern. If I came into the picture to reside with them, she was more concerned about how were they going to explain to the church where I came from. And what that looks like for anybody who cares is either you would have to say that her kids were born out of wedlock, and she was never married, and those were his adopted stepkids. Because right now they just look like one complete nucleus.
Right.
By the time they went to that church, or it would look like he cheated. Crazy as it sounds, those 2 stupid secrets were too big for them to give me a place to stay. There it is, bottom line. So at the time, still, you know, being a teenager, whichever age you want to call it, the point is you're not going to question it, because by this time, you got to know and don't even ask me why I'm about to say what I'm about to say. My mother was leaving me, but I resented him. I know that don't make sense, but hey, and let me say this to you for anybody who got kids, and I think most kids who probably in those situations, it's something crazy about a mother's love. Kid you not. You know what I'm saying? Now, my father had the means, you know what I'm saying, but my mother, clearly she wasn't stable. But during that period from the 4th to the 8th, and for anybody who's listening to me right now, I have to say this, why this was so important. The 4th to the 8th grade matter. To anybody who's not able to see my face, let's say I sound educated, proper, white, or whatever. The temporary 4th to 8th grade allowed me enough stability. That's why I learned sports. That temporary amount of stability caused me to see constructive, positive things. Now, don't get me wrong, there was issues there because let me say this to you, for anybody who don't understand, because this was something that I had to really deal with. Mass confusion in this sense. From 4th to 8th grade, think about 4th to 8th grade. I'm not really sure the age range, but I'm probably a year or two behind because of my records getting lost so much because all of the transferring from schools during that period. 4th to 8th, remember, that was stability. You might as well say school-wise, 4th to 12th. But prior to that, to the 4th grade, just changing schools often. So what ended up happening was, now this is where it's sickening. You know you're in this new environment. I just happened to be older than my two cousins because I was actually staying with my two cousins, my brother's sister. Those were her kids. So I was living with them. But it's amazing.
Your dad's sister?
Yeah.
Okay.
But this is the amazing part. I'm 1 year older than my cousin. But now all of a sudden you're thrusted into a degree of responsibility that you're not used to. And remember, I'm not used to having regular food. And I recall, in some ways, I almost want to say it was abuse. I keep this in mind. At that time, I'm not aware of how I'm supposed to act, behave, or whatever.
Right.
But I do know that I was somewhat sensitive. And when I say sensitive in a sense right here. Remember the homelessness, my sister and them being in foster homes?
Okay.
All I knew is I don't want to not be stable. So I would never be aggressive, always afraid to offend. When I say offend, I'm not even saying a particular person. I'm saying I just want to keep this stability.
Right.
So let's say if I didn't step up to the plate the way I was expected, a knock on the head. I can't say it was abusive in a sense that kids are abused on a regular basis. It wasn't like that. The abuse for me psychologically was I didn't know what expectations were, what nobody wanted from me. Because if I tried to step up, then I was blamed for whatever reason. You know, put it to you like this. I'm 1 year older than, let's say, a 10 or 11-year-old kid. Whatever that age frame is between 4th and 8th. So here it is. I'm trying to live up to this expectation that you guys are putting on me. That's all I heard. You're the oldest. But you all should have some sense of where I come from and the experience I don't have. So for me, seconds took on a different meaning. Like if we was getting ready to go to school and donuts were bought, I eat a donut and then as I speak to you right now, I probably gulped it down because, you know, I never had the opportunity to sit down and cherish a meal.
Right.
Not knowing when it's coming back. So this is new to me, donuts. So we hear something to the effect from an uncle, whoever was overseeing us at the time. So, how many donuts did you all have? So I would say 1. And then I get snapped upside the head. You a damn lie. You had 2. But again, remember what I'm saying? I can't relate to anybody what's going on inside of me, period. You know, now, going from 4th to 8th, because of this psychological stuff that I'm dealing with, really don't know how to communicate, this is not feeling right. Again, I can't say it was abuse. I experienced better Christmases. Got my first bike and all of that. My aunt and them, they didn't favor me less for the most part. I can't say that. But you know you're not somebody's child.
Right.
Those are going to be subtle gestures. So what happened was I did excel in sports, big time. I was Mr. Everything. And the fact that I was all of a sudden in this neighborhood meeting people, but now all of a sudden to my aunt's children, I'm Mr. Popular. that didn't feel right because I could tell there was resentment for it. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? So when I graduate the 8th grade, my mother comes back into the picture.
Oh.
Problem is, I'm so fed up with this abuse. Now, remember, when I'm saying abuse, what I'm saying is nobody's trying to get to know what's in my head. I'm afraid to speak. I'm afraid to say anything. So I go back to my mother.
Okay. Oh.
That's where 9th grade to the 12th comes in.
Okay.
Now my brother and sister are back in the picture.
Okay.
And to this day, we don't never. The only thing that I know about their experience living in the foster home was that my sister had a habit of putting razor blades in fruit.
In what?
Fruit. Because they experienced a level of abuse through in being in foster families.
Like what type of abuse?
They never say.
Oh, okay.
But if you think about it like this, imagine my situation, level of expectation, then think about theirs. All I could think of is maybe to some degree they were having the same difficulties, but not able to communicate it. But they know they're something that's not right about what they're experiencing. So to make a kid put razor blades in apples, oranges, or whatever, you're trying to hurt somebody. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Now clearly, but we never. My experiences, theirs. To this day, we've never ever discussed them. Now keep this in mind. That's part of my issue with my brother and sister to this day, because you would think we would be extremely close. But the problem was they associated me going to live with my father. You see me, I'm fair-skinned, light-skinned for the most part. They're like African dark. Mm-hmm. My mother was extremely dark. Everybody on my mother's side was extremely dark. My father was, on his side of the family, more high yellow, kind of red. You could see the veins running through his body. Mm-hmm. So what happened is they associated that with me being favored. They didn't see it as though they had fathers who weren't in their lives at all. Mm-hmm. That was the only benefit. Nothing I influenced or whatever. My father just came from a family that was more stable. Mm-hmm. You know, like on his side, one of my uncles is a world-renowned scientist. Mm-hmm. But for my brother and sister, when we came back, when we had our reunion with my mother, now I'm dealing with that thing. You know what I'm saying? Because they want to talk about who's being treated better, who's not. Now, keep in mind, I can't control my skin color, but they're dark. Now, here it is. Remember, I was telling you about that popularity I was gaining. I turned into a superstar athlete. And, of course, I don't know I'm intelligent. The school books and stuff, I mean, the schoolwork, a lot of things came easy to me. And plus, later on down the road, I found out I was ADHD. So that was just a lot of energy. Yeah, that was just a lot of energy. Mm-hmm. The sports gave me an opportunity to let it out. And, of course, too, I'm experiencing things that I never experienced. So, having fun, should I say. Not experiencing, but having fun.
Okay.
Being popular. Now, while I was in high school, up into the 7th grade, sophomore. So what ended up happening, here comes the issue with the housing again.
Oh, my goodness.
You know what I'm saying? Because my mother, again...
Unstable.
Yeah. So now, again, yeah. So now this is where... And when I say to you, the 2 years that I was living with my mother, anybody who knows about the cabinet courts, the history of the cabinet courts.
Okay.
All I know is I was bouncing around a lot. That's all I can tell people. Mm-hmm. So with the bouncing around, when my name started getting out there, everybody was kind of predicting me to be Mr. St. Louis. And then that's where my father all of a sudden finds a way into the picture. But by this time, he's not with his
ex-wife.
Right, he's not with her anymore. And so now, remember I said he was an x-ray tech? Bowen Jewish Hospital. Jewish hospital. It wasn't Bowen's Jewish at the time. It was Jewish hospital. So what ended up happening was, this is so crazy. He would be x-raying people. And everybody would be like, have you heard about that dude, John Avery, the quarterback for Sodan? Nobody knows he's my father. Mm-hmm. So now he wants to, he's seeing something big down the road. So now he comes along and stuff, and he's allowing me to stay with him. But I may have stayed with him for a year or whatever, but here's a problem with that. All of a sudden, you ever thought about changing your name to what? His last name was Gay, G-A-Y-E. So he wanted me to consider changing my name to Gay. Now, remember, I'm still passive to a certain degree, because no matter what, this is still my father. resentment or whatever, not stupid, but needing some place to stay is overpowering everything else.
Right.
So what ended up happening, I went to stay with him, and then when he asked me to change my name, and I'm like, nah, man, I'm not doing it. Now remember, I really got a lot of stuff pending from me, so I really want to just limit every conversation. Because now at this point right here, I'm bordering a man.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And remember, I told you, nobody's ever asked me anything about how I feel, my state of mind. You know what I'm saying? In some ways, I was a ticking time bomb that could go in any direction. You know what I'm saying? Remember, consciously suppressing feelings, state of mind, mentality, or whatever. Matter of fact, I didn't even know I was smart or intelligent because I was never really in a stable environment. And then when I told you about the 4th to the 8th grade, remember that turned into resentment because I was getting attention. So nobody really never built up my positive qualities. So for me, I'm just a functioning person for whatever age I may have been at that time. And then there came a point in time when now I'm going into my senior year, but me and my father's relationship is fractured. So again, that's why I was telling you when I came out of school, it wasn't until I got out of the military when I started telling everybody that I never had stability, the homelessness or whatever. And a lot of guys were upset because I was so popular to the point where, well, here's the reason why I couldn't tell people my actual situation. I was an absolute jock. I couldn't go anywhere in St. Louis where people know who I am. So the thing is, remember, I'm still dealing with this issue. I don't have stability. So for me, going to the next level, it's all just hoping it'll work out. So when I get to this, get ready to go into this next level, I'm thinking now that I'm old enough to go to college, that I can function from here. But you still needed a dose to sign. I probably was 19 when I went to college, but you still need a dose to sign off on stuff. Here comes that problem again. Now that I done left home, I really don't have nobody to turn to. And plus, by this time, most people were pretty much, you know, as far as they were concerned, I'm sure there was some resentment that I left my aunt and went back to stay with my mother. I think on my father's side, I think a lot of them resented it. But had anyone spent any time talking to me, they would have realized that wasn't the choice that I wanted to make. Duh. It's just the expectations you were putting on me. What am I supposed to do? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it was just no communication in there anywhere. You know what I'm saying? So now, what I would say to people about how all of that comes together, imagine not really, now you're going to be catapulted into the real world, but you don't know jack anything. You don't know anything. So now imagine this is really my first awakening to life. And when I say my first awakening to life, what I'm saying is I don't know nothing about paying bills. I don't know nothing about rent. I don't know nothing about anything. So I'm playing this off. Anybody who I'm encountering, this is where I'm saying subconsciously, if you think back to it, how did I pull all of this off without having anybody, anything to talk to, not having any skills that were relevant? My only skills were sports. And I never learned to hustle because I did know one thing from that 4th to 8th. That's why I kept mentioning it. That allowed me to have a fantasy about college. All I knew it was something beyond high school. And that's where you turn into an adult. So again, I'm back to, I'm just thinking in terms of just get to college. Just get to college. As though everything would be resolved, or whatever the case may be. So then that's when you get into, now that you're an adult, something that no one ever prepared you for. What do you do as an adult? I never patterned anybody. I never saw an adult really doing, I never had an adult educate me.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Outside of teachers at school.
Yeah. Well, they didn't even educate me because here's the one flaw that I have. And I still have that flaw to this day. Because I never asked for anything. Never told anybody I needed anything. Never exposing anybody to my needs. So everything for me, you're figuring it out as you go. But what I didn't understand is I was so intelligent, or the way I was presenting myself, everybody thought I had it together. It blew me away. Most people thought I was living with a rich family. I'm not exaggerating. And again, I'm back to, because I function so well, not being a whiner or complainer, and that goes back to maybe because of where I come from. Complaining, remember I was telling you about because I was so afraid to, that's why I didn't know how to open up to people.
You were so afraid to mess up. You
Yeah.
just
So that's what made it difficult for me to share things too with people. And so what was happening is, as a jock, that was my salvation. So even now here it is. I'm already presenting myself in a positive way. I'm not complaining. And back then, excuse my language, but I have to say it like this. I was an athlete and I was built like a brick shit house. So physically, people looking at me, it just looked like I had it all together. Like I was just one of the most absolute luckiest people in the world, period. But I'm still internally dealing with the fact I know nothing. And in some ways, to this day, I resent no one ever challenged me. As I speak to you right now, I'm 57 years old. This is going to shock you when I say this. Would you believe no woman has ever washed a piece of clothing of mine? To this day, I have done such a good job of demonstrating independence, autonomy, and I don't ask people for anything. So people just assumed I had it all together. But again, I'm back to, remember, from the time I was young, nobody ever asked me anything.
Right.
So nobody ever got to see inside of, I think probably if somebody had asked me something, you know how it is, like a lot of people want to talk.
Right.
Like I'm not really a believer of people who are laid back. Everybody wants to talk, man. It's like I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and why do people buy nice things? Are they really buying it for themselves, or is it because they want what they want other people to see? You know what I'm saying? Most people do things because of what they want other people to see. With me, whatever or however I presented myself, it was not for what I wanted people to see. It's just what I didn't want them to know. You know what I'm saying? Now think about what I'm saying. Never had anything, so I can't pretend.
Ain't nothing to see.
Right. So all I did was did it in such a mild way to where nobody could really gauge me as being, I was just always presentable.
Right.
That's it, just presentable. But if anybody had paid attention to, dude, I ain't never invited you to my home.
I ain't got one for real.
Right, I ain't got one. You know what I'm saying? You all ain't never seen me dig in my pocket and say, suggest, let's go here and there.
I ain't got no money.
Yeah. So, but because I was so easy going, a lot of people just wanted me around them. You know what I'm saying? So what I would say to people is the consequence of all of that is, as an adult, it carried over. I'm not a relationship person. You know what I'm saying? I've accepted the fact, because to this day, if you're a female, remember, if you come around me, it looks like I got it all together. So it looked like I got it. It looked like it's so tight to where females it's almost like people don't want to offend me. They don't want to insult me. They don't want to disrespect me. And then when you listen to me talk, I don't know how I'm coming across other people, but I think other people from the outside, if they heard me talk, you can see me physically. So that's the other dilemma I deal with now. Physically, people look at me and they're intimidated physically before they get to know me. Now is the confusion really starts when I start talking. You know what I'm saying? So again, but everybody still give me a free pass. You know what I'm saying? So as far as the homelessness goes, now at this point in my life, everything is totally irrelevant. But what I will say is small things don't faze me. People's everyday issues are irrelevant. I mean, I don't want to say irrelevant, but I think people waste a lot of time crying about mediocre bullshit. Matter of fact, I tell you, when I was just talking to you guys earlier before we started this session, the VA is the first time that I've actually allowed something to piss me off. Because now, for the first time, I want something I'm entitled to. That's another reason why I was telling you that, look, when I say this to you, this is going to be really important. When I say I'm going to retire this year, here's part of the reason why I have to retire. You ready?
Where you retiring from?
Probation and parole. I'm a probation officer. Probation and parole officer.
Okay, how
Here's
long?
why it's so important.
Okay.
It's going to shock you. It's going to shock your audience. You ready? This would be the first time that I can claim to have something of my own. Think about that.
First time in 57 years
Yeah,
that you can
first
claim
time.
to have something of your own.
I got 2 kids.
Uh-huh.
But again, with my kids, I don't have, and I'm okay with saying this because, again, when I talk, this is what I would like to tell people. And this is why I have so much success with probation and parole. And this is why a lot of people like to talk to me. Because I make people accept their ignorances. Because if I had the one thing that would come out of this story that I'm so comfortable telling everybody, ignorance, not ignorance and stupid. You know, in our community, sometimes people equate ignorance with being
Stupid or
something to that effect.
It just
I'm
means lack
purely
of. It
talking
means
about,
lack of knowledge.
lack of knowledge. And so what I would tell people, and that's what I tell my clients, because I've experienced it and lived it. And there came a point in time when, and this is well into my 30s, maybe my 40s, when you, matter of fact, for anybody that may want to know, I bought a house when I was like 40. Didn't feel right. I didn't understand it. So I walked away from it in 45, at the age of 45. Now remember, this is so important because that's when I finally hit my learning curve. Because, and the reason why that was relevant, because when I moved in the house, it didn't feel right. Now, I was smart enough not to use my VA loan. But I bought the house. Again, my mind, I'm smart. I can't tell you how I was able to pull things off.
Right.
But when I moved into the house, what ended up happening was, it didn't feel right. But I couldn't understand what the confusion was. Now, don't get me wrong. I had a scary period in that house because I loved that house. At the time, it felt like that was my house, but I loved it more than I did anything. More than a woman, more than a... I can't even explain it to you.
Because it was yours.
Right.
For the first time. I mean,
But what was happening was... And I didn't even consider it mine because I still had payments on it.
got you.
Unlike what's happening when I retired this year. But what happened was I finally figured out what it was. And this is now why I'm an educator. When I say educator, why I help people with their problems. Not that I'm seeking to help people.
Right.
Because I tell anybody, I don't tell people what to do because you got to live with the consequences. But I can offer you, when it comes to survival, I'm your man. Because survival is all about you being honest with yourself, period. And here it comes. 5 years later, going into that 5th year, what happened was I was like, I got to figure out what's wrong with me in this house. And then I realized the reason why this is difficult for you is because, dude, you never had any experience with a house. I didn't know you had to have certain... Rent is one thing. Mortgage is one thing. The difference between rent and mortgage, with mortgage, you have so many expenses that can almost equate to half of your mortgage. You see what I'm saying? You don't think about that. If you grew up in a house, you saw your parents probably dealing with it, or they educated you about it. So for me, when I figured out what was wrong, that's when I had to open up about... Dude, you don't know. You just don't know. Now you realize what the problem is. Dude, that's why it's been such a struggle. Because instead of you accepting, instead of you dealing with the things you don't know, you're doing what you've always done. You're just powering through everything. But it's not leading to certain consequences. I mean, it's not leading to certain positive consequences. You know what I'm saying? I'm so good at staving off anything. I don't care what it is. And that's why I tell people, you can't battle me emotionally. Male, female, cousin, whoever. Like my kids, you know, I'm talking about having a relationship with them. Well, we're having relationships now. You know what I'm saying? But part of the reason why I didn't have relationships, I'm going to say it again. Remember what I keep saying about me not wanting to harm, hurt people, or whatever because of my experiences. What happened was I trusted my kids' mother. I did right by them. They wouldn't tell you any stories about how it was abusive, negative. All they'll tell you is, when it came time, everybody have discussions about, well, you act like you don't want to be with me. You can only guess what my attitude was. That's on you. Man, I'm the best when it comes to checking my emotions. You're not getting emotions out of me. I don't make decisions based on emotions. So what I would find out down the road is a lot of women would say, the reason why I only got 2 kids, the reason why they disappeared with your kids was because if they couldn't hurt you or because you didn't respond, what they were looking for you was just for you to say something to try to maintain that union. But you never offered up anything to keep that union together. So what's the next best thing to do to hurt you? Well, I can't hurt you, but I can hurt you by taking your kids. You see what I'm saying? Now, that was my only weakness. But by this time and stuff, because I never involved lawyers, because I trusted them. Let me say this. I didn't trust them as much as I wanted what was best for my kids. So in those situations, financially, I made sure everybody was all right. But the consequence of that was not involving lawyers for your own security. You see what I'm saying? So they walked out of it, like say when I left my son's mother, I was married for like 6 months or whatever. When I left,
You were
my
married for
daughter's
6
mother-
months?
Yeah, in the military.
Oh,
It's an annulment, so I really don't want to say
Okay.
marriage. But what happened was bank account, you name it. I didn't even ask to see what we accumulated. It was for the best interest of my daughter, and that was in California. So I just left everything, and I left. But the consequence of that was because I didn't secure things through a lawyer, she moved out of California. And that's why I'm saying the search for my daughter or whatever. Like, to be honest with you, that's the only reason I'm still in St. Louis, because I knew at some point if my daughter reached a certain age, and through technology, social media, that's how she ultimately ended up finding me.
okay.
You know what I'm saying?
So she found you.
Yeah. So, and that was probably about 5 or 6 years ago.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? So in my head, and I remember all this other stuff I'm dealing with, my issue was I didn't know if my daughter was alive or dead.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? So with that being said, remember the emotional thing or whatever, and here it is again, and this is one of the reasons, another reason why I didn't get into relationships. Remember, I'm pretty good at accepting all things. So the one thing, and I think a female would have had me if any female had ever asked me what my circumstances were with my kids. But again, I'm back to, I look so solid, put together that people,
right.
But I resented that because in my world, how in the world can a woman date a man? I'm openly telling you, I don't have my kids in my life. You don't give a damn about what kind of man I am?
What's your take on parenting?
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Now, it's not a threatening one, but when I hear about guys who, let's say, paid child support for a lifetime, when I hear, and this is where, in some ways, I wish I was more open, because a lot of those guys who went through issues with child support, it was a woman that came into their lives and said, and said, you paying child support and you never had a DNA. You noticing a pattern here? I'm probably not where I should have been because, again, no one ever just would ask questions. Everybody just gave me a free pass, benefit of the doubt.
You had all types of stuff going on internally.
Yeah.
Needed help.
Yeah.
Didn't know.
Yeah. But the thing is and stuff, though, here's the problem. How does a person know when they need help? Most of us gauge that physically or financially. But you got to remember, what does suffering look like to me? I'm good. I'm good. Life is life. I just see it as you take it as it comes. Period. You know what I'm saying? Now, keep in mind, too, the reason why it was easier for me to say that as well is because I've never been a fool about my choices. You see what I'm saying? I'm big on, and that goes back to what I was saying about when it comes to survival. Know why you're making the choice you're making. And that's why, I'm going to go back to what I'm saying. That's why I tell everybody, I can't tell anybody, I would never tell anybody what to do in a given situation because you got to live with the consequences. Don't it sound like I was practicing what I was preaching? I didn't use that as a crutch to fall back to make excuses. You know what I'm saying? It was strictly, I made a choice. Remember, I didn't get a lawyer. That's a consequence of me not seeing my children. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I could have done something about it, but in my mind, because I'm trying to do right by people, nobody's ever did right by me. But I'm conflating trust versus revenge. It was more of a vengeful thing on their parts versus them recognizing me trust. I'm going to give them what we went through. That has nothing to do, like I love kids, man. I'm a phenomenal, I got all kind of guy kids or whatever. Love kids, you know, but in terms of my personal children, and then, of course, the mothers, they can't give any negative accounts of our experiences whatsoever. So the only thing that my kids know of me is that I wasn't there. And like my daughter, she made a statement to their face. She said, hey, my mother's my best friend. Well, my daughter, and I did tell her this, I say, look, you think I left you I was paying child support to the state of California. And I still got the letter to this day, not an exaggeration. So I told my daughter, I say, look, here, I want you to hear this. If you want to know, because you said your mother's your best friend, I already know what that means. You know what I'm saying? Well, I would never disrespect your mother anyway, because no matter how I see it, my daughter's phenomenal. She just now had her first child at the age of 35, getting married. So I knew, I mean, don't get me wrong, I never messed with a certain kind of woman, but I always dealt with a certain kind of woman.
Right.
So that seed, I already knew, other than being dead, I already knew my daughter was going to be raised a certain way. Her mother had that in her. So what ended up happening, I told my daughter, I got the letter from the state of California returning my child support checks. And in that letter, it says, we're returning your checks, and I called them. Which I don't want these checks, because I knew it was going to my daughter. I'm not a selfish person. And so what they said was, in the letter, unable to locate mother and child. That's why I was getting the checks back. So at that point right there, since California couldn't give me anything, and again, social media wasn't available, phone number stopped working for her. So what I'm saying is, that's why I said I had always questioned if they were still living. I had no way of knowing.
Right.
Period. And so with that, that's why I tell my daughter, the truth is there. Remember what I said about that letter? Who turns down child support? A person who don't want to be found. So that's why I'm with my daughter right now, and I had to have a difficult discussion with my daughter by telling her, hey man, I got a story to tell. I'm not going to tell you anybody else's story, but I got that letter. Now, at this point, you're alive, so you can only imagine the weight off my shoulders. But equally the same, you've already made it clear, we can't have a real discussion because your mind isn't made up. I'm not going to call you dad. I'm not going to say I love you.
Yeah.
Really? So now watch this. Remember, though, there's something. So here's me now. Really? Tell you what. It's time for me to live mine. You see what I'm saying? When you have kids, you'll start to understand. You'll know who I am then, because I'm going to, how do you say that? I'll live vicariously through your kids. That's how you get to know who I am. You know what I'm saying? You're missing a lot. You know what I'm saying? Because as far as knowledge, you know, all these different things or whatever. And like I said, she's a good girl. And a lot of females in passing, ironically, where you were, she lives in Houston. Some of them wanted to reach out to her so they can give her an account of, do you know this dude has been hurting all of these years without you in his life? And when I say that, for everybody who needs to hear this, this is really important. When I say I stayed in his hellhole, talking about St. Louis, that was another reason why I had committed myself to, I wasn't raising anybody else's child without knowing where mine were. That was another reason. And that's why I said if a woman had asked me about my commitment to relationships, I would have told them. Everything for me, man, is just physical. I have no problem with a person moving on. I wasn't raising anybody else's kids. That wasn't going to happen. Now, who would say that unless I'm a certain kind of man? I have my principles.
Where's your son? Where was your son?
Now, my son, actually, it was his mother who found my daughter. My daughter's name has been changed because her mother got married. So what ended up happening was she and I didn't have a relationship because when she got pregnant with my son, here's what happened with him. When she got pregnant, she already understood that I wasn't about serious relationship. She was 15 years younger than me. I was like 35. She was like 20. But again, and I got caught up in an okie doke. And this is a true story. I ain't got to lie about anything, make excuses. But what happened was, always use protection. She was tall, fine, all of the above. But I was very strict about not putting kids in anybody else. But unfortunately, I met her mother, who was living in some kind of rehab facility across the water. And her mother said the same thing that she had repeated like 30 days prior. Or too bad my daughter can't have kids because of the ovarian cancer. So in my world, I got a freebie.
Well, you got a son.
Right, bingo.
So.
Now the consequence of that is, again, once she told me she was pregnant, I never touched her again. Now I'm going back to what I said about, I'm not fighting for you. And there it goes back to where a lot of people, the emotion is cut off. Now it's, I said I didn't want kids by you for a reason. Or you're gonna make me do something I don't want to do? Now
Okay.
she starts a relationship with a guy, totally respectable, good guy. But what happened was I was paying child support and carrying medical on my son. Here it is again, not getting a lawyer, trusting in other people. So what happened was she never allowed him and I to have contact. This is true story. Get ready, everybody. When my son was 17, they got a daughter together, like 2 years behind a year and a half behind my son.
Okay.
He called me up and said, "Hey, John, I need you to do me a favor." Because by this time, they're divorcing, and he's got her on child support. He said, "Hey, man, I need you to do me a favor." Remember, me and him not ever had contact. She would never let us have contact.
Okay.
So through that, I didn't see my son.
Okay.
She was keeping us apart for a reason. And here
Okay.
was the reason. "Hey, John, can you carry John on your medical?" "Carry him on my..." "Man, that dude done had medical since he was a baby." "John, you kidding?" "Dude, I've been paying $500 a month child support since he been born." "John, you kidding?" "Hold on, bro. You telling me you didn't know this?" You see what I'm saying? So she was manipulating him. You know what I'm saying? She was manipulating him the entire time. You see what I'm saying? So again, I go back to what I'm saying. I did certain things and that's one of the reasons I didn't push the issue too hard, because I wanted my son. And she would call me periodically saying, would I keep him, excuse my language, well, here's what happened. Actually, when my son was born, for the first 2 years, I kept him 50% of the time. She would call me up and say, "Hey, can I stay all night with you and him?" I would call her husband and say, "Hey, man, be careful, bruh. This is what she on." I ain't trying to hear it like that. But what happened was, again, I never, when the relationship is over, I don't dip and dab. I'm gone. So what ended up happening was, and I'll never forget this, the reason why, and I thought about that, I didn't think about it when you said it earlier, but what happened was my mother was babysitting, and I was out at Dave and Buster's. A friend of mine was in town, and I was having a party. So she called me up saying, "Where's John?" Like, he's at my mother's house. And for whatever reason, I don't recall exactly, it was loud at Dave and Buster's. So she said something. I'm like, "Man, you on some dumb shit," and I let it go. So when I went to pick up my son, my mother said she kicked in the door and took my son.
Oh.
So at this point right here, all bargaining is off. I didn't care about the child support. But at this point right here, you telling me you took my son, and you're gonna try to muscle me? Oh man, you have no idea. So there came a point in time, and this is the truth. She's treating it like it's child's play. You already remember I'm going through something with my daughter. Now I'm ready to hurt somebody. Remember I kept telling you about it's there. So to her, it's a game. You know what I'm saying? But I wanted to, and this is what I told her. It's such a game to you that here's my commitment to you, and I hope you honor these words. There will be no part-time with my son, man. You either give me my son, you know what I'm saying, or you're going to make me hurt you. But you need to understand what I mean by hurt. If I have to put my hands on you, I know all bets are off with my son. So since it's a game to you, I can't say this to her, but my point is, you're going to offend me to the point where I'm going to have to kill you. If I get to the point where I got to put my hands on you, you know what I'm saying? I'm not dealing with never having a possibility of seeing my son. I'd rather kill you, you know what I'm saying, and have a real reason to not be with my son. So ultimately, what ended up happening during that period, Anthony would tell me, he used to be like, "Hey man, I should tell her, hey, he got a good father, let his son." So what happened was, he say, "Man, I remember several times she told me, he hate my guts. He just didn't know why." He didn't know that I was always trying to get my son. Like, she would call me up and say she going out of town and say, "Can I keep him temporarily?" I want my son, man. It's no bargaining. You see what I'm saying? But come to find out, those times that she called me, she was actually leaving him to go out of town for long periods. So he started having struggles with her. But the problem was, he didn't know how to get in contact with me, and I didn't know how to get in contact with him. So again, there wasn't no abandonment. I was there. Matter of fact, the house that I was telling you about, that was part of the reason why I got that house, because she was going to let him come and stay with me. You see what I'm saying? So when that didn't happen, the house is useless to me. And so that's when I decided to struggle with the house first, then all of that and stuff. So what ended up happening, I gave up the house.
Okay.
Sometimes when I think about how her ex-husband, in some ways, there's some resentment that I have for him because I think he could have gotten in contact with me, but I think he was afraid of her. Because I tell him to this day, man, do you realize, bro, if you had called me one time when she abandoned you all, this is how I stopped paying child support. When they got their divorce, she had to pay child support. And she's leaning on me complaining about child support. Now, this is where he and here it is. I say, you know what, my man? She ain't going to keep getting his child support. So he and I went to child support. I'm like, look, my son is living with him.
Mm-hmm.
And by this time, me and my son now is finally back in contact.
Okay.
My son is living with him. The child support should go to him. But they wouldn't let me and him alter it, even though we had all of the proof. We actually sat there together. What caused the child support to come to an end was her calling me about child support, and I'm like, how ironic is this? You have been collecting child support that clearly now I realize my son was never benefiting from because you never used the medical. For anybody out there who's good at math, now remember the $500 a month child support is one thing. And again, I didn't care about the child support because it was for at least thinking it was for my child. That's not counting the medical that I was paying for.
Mm-hmm.
So just think about 17 years of $500 a month. And even if you separate that, think about 140, let's say 150 average for medical. All of that money just wasted. Just down the drain. Nobody claimed it. Nobody used it or whatever the case may be. You know what I'm saying? And so what I told her was, I just want you to put in your head for a minute the person you're complaining about now that you got to pay child support. Because what was happening was the child support did start getting ready to go to him. His wife was the one that made that happen, and she did it over the phone. Where they wouldn't talk to us with all of her evidence and proof, his wife, I don't know what it is about females, but she was able to do it over the phone and they didn't even know who she was. So she stopped her from getting the child support, but they kept sending her payments. So what was happening was, and he really didn't even want the child support. He just didn't want her benefiting from it because my son wasn't living with her.
Okay.
So what ended up happening was when she called me and I pointed out to her, she really stopped the child support to hurt him. You see what I'm saying? To hurt her ex-husband. You know what I'm saying? Because I told her, it sounds kind of ironic, somebody complaining about paying, who received child support, traveling as a result of it. And now here it is, you've got to pay child support for a daughter who's 16 or 17. You don't even have the years I have. And yet you're complaining. And I think guilt kicked in. So to relieve me of the responsibility, she canceled the child support.
Okay.
And so that's where me and my son now, we're starting to establish a relationship.
So to sum up, your childhood came into your adulthood.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. Because and that's what I'm saying.
Do you have anybody to talk to now? Do you talk to anybody about that? Did you have
I don't know. Here's the thing right here. Actually, it was never a secret. Everybody knew how I felt about my kids.
No, I mean, like, your situations. You got your kids now, but do you go to therapy? Do you...
You want to know how much talking I do? That's what I was telling you. This conversation you and I having, that's why I say this is the first in-depth conversation I've ever had. As far as counseling go, I'm going to keep it real with you. Remember, I wasn't able to use emotions as a means to justify dumb shit. Excuse the language, but it has to be said that way. I never had the luxury of being emotional. Because, like I said before, when you're trying to figure out where your next meal is coming from, you see what I'm saying? When you're trying to figure out where you're going to sleep.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It depended. I said this when I told you I was coming over here. I was telling my friend this, and he asked me this question, and this is what I'll say to you and anybody else. And somewhere down the road, some of these things I've said, if more definition is required, I ain't got no problem talking about it. But what I would say is, if I had to sum up all of this in terms of who I am today as a person or whatever.
Perfect.
And if somebody was going through what I was going through, here's what I would say to anybody.
Advice.
Advice.
Come on.
Don't take my story and think that it'll work out for you. You got to understand, you have to accept what you were born with. There's no question I was born with a higher level of intelligence. I'm not a religious person. I'm a realist. And some people may even say, my being a realist, I denounced God at the age of 23. Because again, it didn't make sense. I'm speaking factually about, I was born into a situation. Where did I have a chance to do wrong by society or anybody? You know what I'm saying? Please don't tell me, because even with my survival methods, techniques, or whatever, I didn't harm anybody along the way. I was good at manipulation. But it didn't cost anybody anything, not anything significant anyway. So what would happen is, what I would tell people is, you just can't automatically do what I did to survive. All I could tell you to do is accept your reality. And when I say accept your reality, that's how you downplay the ignorance. I didn't factor in the ignorance until it was probably too late. Well, I won't say too late, but well into my adulthood. But unless you're gifted with a certain level of intelligence, you know what I'm saying? You got to play within how would you define it? You know what I'm saying? Whatever your mental capacity is, you have to play within that realm.
Right.
Don't try to reach further than you can, because
stay in your bubble. Don't try to reach out. Don't go outside the box if you know it's not for you.
Exactly. And so what I'm saying is, when I kept making pointing out about me keeping things in or whatever, the flip side of that is I am very, very hard. Very hard. You know what I'm saying? I'm a fighter. When I say fighter, I'm talking about mentally and physically.
Yeah,
but physically,
life you done been through.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah. But remember, but keep in mind, me being a fighter though, that's what I'm saying. I want people to be very cautious of this. Some people could easily take what I was doing and call it venting by being physical. Mm-hmm. Luckily for me, I was afraid of losing anything that I had ever gained.
Right.
So being physical would have meant probably going to jail. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying? And for me, that just wasn't an option. There's no way I wasn't going to achieve something and just be in jail. No, man, ain't no way.
So do you get a, because you're a probation parole officer, do you, with your clients, do you take, like, your situation, you feel good about helping them?
Oh, yeah,
like your clients,
definitely.
You know, because you know what you went through, and so you try to put that off. You know, you don't tell them what to do.
Right.
You can suggest
right.
things. You can give them information, but it's up to them.
Right.
You know, and they've already served time, or either that's if they're on parole.
Right.
If they're on probation. Some of them went. Some of them have not been to prison. Some maybe they have.
I give you one that'll sum up. I'm going to cut you up, but I'm going to say this because it's going to sum it up. I interviewed a guy yesterday coming to see me, right? And he was shot in the mouth by the police. They put the gun in his mouth and pulled the trigger. His father testifies to that. So he also has a metal rod in his leg. You know what I'm saying? So I'm referring him to mental health.
Okay.
But here's something that I told him. I say, look, let me ask you a question. For all of the talking we've been doing, what are the things that you have going on or against yourself that are some things that you should always keep at the forefront to argue any situation, state of mind, or whatever? He couldn't do it. And here's me right here. Hey, bro, your father's sitting here, but I'm going to tell you right now, every time I see you, you've got to let something come to the forefront of your conversation. Bruh, PTSD. You have a rod. Own that shit. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because that's going to be your salvation. You can't change those things about yourself. The sooner you
accept it,
the sooner you accept it, that's how you're gonna know what to do with it next. And that's what I'm saying about what I'm trying to say to people. Don't try to pattern me, because you have to accept your limitations. If you don't have limitations and you can go beyond me, then you should be able to do something much, much better, because you're hearing a testimony of what keeping it all in and not asking questions can do. But in this particular guy's case right here, and I told him, hey, bro, your father want a break. So the sooner, when you go to this mental health thing, don't go in here trying to impress these people about how you got it going on.
Give them the real. You need help.
You need bingo. There it
is. And you know what? And I appreciate you, because you're helping them. You're trying to get, hey man, you're sitting here and looking at somebody. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You may feel like it's late for you. You know what I'm saying? So that's why even you saying for the first time you're gonna have something on your own, and it's gonna be stable, and you're gonna retire. You know. But the situation that you went through, you take it and you give this information to letting them know, like, hey, you looking at a sitting person who did not address anything. So my job here at P&P, you've been there for how long?
22 years.
Educate. That's what you've been doing for 22 years. You've been trying to educate, but you still been working on yourself, trying to learn yourself and everything.
And just to give you an example, let me show you something. This is going to come full circle. Let me show you how significant this is. Remember I told you about the homelessness?
Right.
You sitting down? I know you are.
Yeah.
I was just telling somebody as to why this is so important. I got a nice car. You know what I'm saying? But here's the deal right here. I say to people, and think about everything that's going on in society. Right now, I'm telling people, the people who are probably going to be most secure with the way things are going on in society are going to be those who have money being deposited into their account and they don't have to leave the house. Retirement, SSI, Social Security. Here's why that matters. Watch this. Remember what I was saying about me being homeless? Here I am, 57, and this is my story. If I'm homeless in my car, I'm not. But if I'm homeless in my car, I got a check being deposited every month.
Right.
If you're going to be homeless, that is the best freaking way to be homeless.
Right.
That's why I got to retire. So that I'll have that security of knowing that I'll always have something deposited into my account, even if I'm homeless. Bottom line.
Man, listen.
That's why it's so important. That's it.
That's
it coming full circle.
That's
man.
a good way to end that. That's a good way to end that. Thank you. And from the Angels Online, happy retirement early. You know what I mean? We thank you for just coming in and giving the people your story.
No doubt.
Man, what is your do you? I'm going to let you do the do you today. It's the do you question for the world, for whoever, start a conversation. They're going to start a conversation. And what was Mr. Avery do you? What did he ask us? Any question.
Do you accept who you are? I mean,
man, that's
great. Do you accept who you are? That's what this is all about, and that's it. That's exactly what I do with anybody who has an issue. First thing I tell them, if you're not willing to look within yourself, and that's what we've been summing up about my clients, and I have a very high success rate. I always tell people, until you internalize it, own it. Matter of fact, I think I mentioned this to you. My client the other day, all of my clients, they laugh about this caveat. Here's what I tell them. And this is where the success with their supervision comes from. I use the $1,000 scratch-off rule. If you don't accept your circumstances, you're going to go home and tell your girlfriend, baby, we got a $1,000 scratch-off. But if you accept your circumstances, you go home and tell your girlfriend, baby, we got $500. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Because you will, if you accept it for what it is, you'll give it the attention that it deserves.
Right.
Because if you don't, it's only going to get worse. To pretend it don't exist, that's that ignorance. And that's where psychologically, until I figured it out, that was the deep down struggle. And I think that's why I say I think I wanted to, unless you talk about it, you know what I'm saying? You need feedback.
Mm-hmm.
You just need feedback.
And it took you this long to figure it out. And now you giving it to the people, giving it to your clients.
Now I'm so hardcore with it and stuff, because again, it's not honestly, I have to say this. It was probably, I did feel pity for myself because you didn't know where it was coming from. Mm-hmm. It just wasn't adding up. Mm-hmm. But that's what I'm saying. Once I accepted, man, this is all about ignorance, bro.
Right.
You just don't know. Quit trying to stave it off. You can see what I'm doing right now, and you can demonstrate this to somebody. Here's what's happening. Say you're in the middle of a circle. Mm-hmm. That circle, on the outside of it, that's the wall of you not allowing things to get to you. That was me for 45 years. Mm-hmm. But then I realized you got to knock down those walls. Mm-hmm. Start letting these things that you're afraid of, let them get to you. Mm-hmm. That's how you start knocking them down. You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
And now I don't have any fears about anything, man. None whatsoever.
And that's why I have the Angels Online, because if the youth can get this information and tackle these problems now, and they're not waiting until they're 45.
Right.
Talk to them, That do you accept who you are is the question from John. I appreciate you for coming in.
No problem, man.
The Angels Online. It's your first time having an in-depth conversation in 57 years, and you gave it to the Angels Online.
No doubt.
We got action. You got to give people what they want. Hey, John, say good people, one time.
Good people, good people.
Oh, good people. All right, y'all.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to the Angels Online, Voice of the Unheard. Please stay tuned for the next episode next Wednesday, each and every Wednesday, and hopefully we motivate, influence, and inspire you. You are someone's angel. Remember, all voices matter. Peace and love from the Angels Online, Voice of the Unheard.